on the street simply on the basis of their ethnicity, the country of origin. We know that these crimes accelerated under the previous president and were in fact fueled by Trump's frequent xenophobic rhetoric that was specifically aimed at Asian Americans and immigrants. And for some of his supporters, like those who stormed the nation's capital just last month, they became emboldened to act on their repulsive beliefs towards those who are actually different from them. So let me be very clear. These are very heinous acts that actually have no place in our society. Again, regardless of who you are, and regardless of where you come from, regardless if you're native born or not, I know that all of my committee members share my anger and my disgust and my revulsion over this wave of hate that has spiked even among our own fellow Angelenos towards our fellow Asian Americans. And I want to note that our committee, with the committee members, are very cognizant of the situation, and we work closely with the LAPD to ensure that any hate-fueled violence against our Asian American brothers and sisters, Asian American Pacific Islander friends, loved ones, and neighbors, it's met with the full weight of the law. In no way anyone who lives in Los Angeles or visits Los Angeles should ever feel that their ethnic identity should make them a target for hate. So I wanted to make those comments. I think it was appropriate to begin today's first regular hearing of this committee. I would like to invite any of my colleagues who would like to share any comments if they wish to do so at this time. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just say that as anyone who has ever been the target of an act of hatred, even a subtle act of hatred that might involve being yelled at or having something thrown at you, as you were describing the higher incidences of hate crime against people of Asian descent in the last couple of years, and really hate crimes with other demographic groups since Trump became president back in 2016. I was just recalling several instances back in the day. I remember one where I was walking to a restaurant in West Hollywood and had something thrown at me, and I heard the word faggot. Another time, also in West Hollywood, when I was visiting friends, simply walking to their house, having something thrown at me and being struck with it. And so anyone who's ever been called a name because of who they are, even if you are strong-willed like I am and was raised with the life skills to be tough and understand the way of the world, it's still very harmful and damaging. So even after all these years, I remember those incidents as crystal clear. I remember what I was wearing. I remember being in shock and not understanding how to respond, and then kind of standing still, waiting to be physically attacked. So just someone who, I don't feel victimized at all because I was never harmed physically. But when you are, when you're attacked in any way because of who you are, it's harmful. And even in a somewhat mild sense, I would call it, as far as what I've been subject to, just in a handful of instances, it stays with you. And it's damaging, it's harmful, and it's soul crushing. So the fact that we're calling attention to hate crimes in the way that you described is really, really important. And people who feel that they have no voice and no power need us to be able to stand up and speak for them and give them voice and give them power and speak unanimously that hate has no place in our society whatsoever. Ugly words and name calling are damaging, and especially if you are singled out just because of who you are, what you look like, or where you come from. And so I think that is one of the important aspects of this committee. And with your leadership, I think we'll do great things. And so I'm very happy about today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Farrell. Very powerful words indeed, and you're absolutely correct. It shouldn't matter who you are, where you come from, which God you pray to. who you love, the color of your skin, and yes, your immigration status. We should all be allowed to live with dignity, with respect, to live with happiness and joy, the pursuit of happiness. And that should not prevent us from advancing opportunities for ourselves individually, for our loved ones, for our family members. So thank you very much, Mr. Farrell. Very powerful words. I do see we've been joined, may the record show, Mr. Price, our Vice Chair, is with us today. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be with you, my colleagues, and our Congressman, who we're going to be hearing from in a minute. Congressman, always good to see you. But I just want to piggyback on the comments made by you and Mr. Farrell. There's no place for hate in our society. There's just no place for it. And we have to speak out against it. And just as you spoke out, just as others have spoken out, we have to continue speaking out against it wherever it raises its head, in terms of race, gender, sexual preference. There's just no place for it. And so we have to continuously, I think, call it out for what it is: wrong, hateful, and unacceptable, and know that we can do better. So I appreciate your leadership, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate being on this committee with my colleagues, and I know that we will be a vigilant voice as we move forward and as we try to create an atmosphere of equity and openness and honesty for everyone. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Okay, we will move forward then. We're going to move on with our agenda. We're going to start with file item number 1. We have a very special guest with us today. He's no other than our very own Congressman. That is Mr. Jimmy Gomez. I know Mr. Gomez, Congressman Jimmy Gomez, is our congressional representative in Washington, D.C. for quite a number of us. I know for sure he's my member of Congress, just right down the street. I'm very lucky with regards to constituent services to get a knock on the door always from our great congressman. I know Mitchell Farrell. I know he's your congressman. I don't know, from this Nithya Rahman, how far he goes out into that area, and if it's part of it or it's Adam Schiff, or you share, both of them. And, I'm not too sure how far down south of Washington Boulevard, Jimmy Gomez, just said just a little bit. But a couple things with Mr. Jimmy Gomez. Obviously, he's our representative for the northeast part of Los Angeles. He's been in Washington, D.C., working hard for us, was part of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico trade agreement, which was the 2.0 version of the NAFTA deal, and made it stronger and better for working families on both sides of the border, as well our environmental regulations and laws on both sides of the border. So I want to thank him very much for taking the time out of his busy schedule to share with each and every one of us, and more importantly, the Angelinos who are tuning in today, what immigration reform looks like in Washington, D.C. As we mentioned it last time, we had a special session last time where we spoke to the issue. We had wonderful experts, national, local, and state leaders come before us to talk about what immigration reform should look like, especially given the fact that, again, this is Los Angeles, and we're home to the largest number of immigrants, both legal as well as undocumented. We know that he's going to be a strong voice for us in Washington, D.C., and I had the privilege of serving together with Jimmy when when I was in the Senate and he was in the Assembly, and we brought tens of millions of dollars to LA, especially for the acquisition, not the acquisition, but for the completion of the LA State Historic Park, and a lot of money for that LA River as well too. He was the former chair of the Appropriations Committee in the California State Assembly, a role that I had the honor to serve as well too when I was a member of the Assembly. Jimmy, we thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We thank you very much for giving us your insight, your testimony with regards to immigration reform, where it's at, what it looks like, what are the particular factors right now impacting decision-making among Democrats as well as Republicans, the issue with regards to filibuster on the Senate side, or is that going to be reconciliation, the whole process. We thank you once again and welcome to our Congressman Jimmy Gomez. I want to, before we go there, Madam Clerk, would you please read the item into the record before we begin the discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item number 1 is a discussion around defining clear priorities regarding immigration reform and the city's position given said priorities, including a discussion with guest participant Congressman Jimmy Gomez, Democrat from
Lastly,
California.
thank you, Madam Clerk. Lastly, I will say that we all know that President Joe Biden announced this morning a sweeping immigration bill that's authored by members of Congress, specifically our very own Linda Sanchez from Southern California. So in the spirit of collaboration, we're pleased to welcome again our local Congressman Jimmy Gomez to report out on the status of the Biden immigration plan. Congressman Jimmy Gomez, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I do have the honor of representing either the entirety of some of you on the City Council or just a piece from Mr. Price and Ms. Rahman. First, congratulations on your election and being a member of the City Council. That's where one of my first jobs was actually as the field deputy for Mike Fewer on the west side of LA and the Valley, handling Laurel Canyon, Coldwater Canyon, Franklin Canyon, and Studio City. So I know all of you are on the front lines. The City Council members are on the front lines when it comes to government, plain and simple. So I just want to say I appreciate all of your work. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this meeting to discuss the Biden administration's U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 and the recent immigration reform executive orders issued by President Biden. And for the last 4 years, as you all know, from even before that, from the day that President Trump came down on those escalators, he was trying to scapegoat and punish the immigrant community, no matter what the background, from across the country. And it's something that we took, all of us, personally, and I took it personally. As a son of immigrants from, my parents are from Mexico before my siblings were born in Mexico. Those attacks were attacks on myself and also across on my community. And it's something that impacted me. And the fear that was just instilled in the children after his election. The kids knew how terrible his administration was going to be, and it was that bad. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. He implemented a child separation policy, based on quote unquote zero tolerance, in order to create a disincentive for people to come here. But he never understood that when your kids are starving or they're facing violence, there's nothing you won't do to get them the help that they need. So this has been a time to both, I believe now that we have a President Biden, to not only to heal our country and our communities, but also to mobilize our efforts to guide the administration on what they should be doing when it comes to immigration and immigration reform. And I'm pleased to hear that and see that President Biden on his first day started fulfilling some of his promises to address our immigration system by issuing executive actions and sending an immigration bill to Congress. And that was just done today. The U.S. Citizenship Act provides a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country, including DACA recipients, TPS holders, and agricultural workers. This bill represents our values as a city and a country of immigrants. Biden's proposals will also, one, strengthen our economy, stabilize our labor markets to grow businesses, require new training for border agents consistent with the Constitution and civil rights, create a border commission made up of CBP and local government actors and nonprofit organizations, protect the rights of all workers by clarifying that labor rights extend to all, regardless of immigration status, speed up the process of more than 1 million cases pending before immigration courts by increasing the number of immigration judges and the process of work permits, requiring legal counsel for children and vulnerable populations, and lifting the 1-year filing deadline. People have to know that although Trump only built so much of his border wall, oftentimes just on behind the old border wall, that he was creating another border wall by slowing down the process of seeking asylum, slowing down the process of when cases would be heard, and then trying to deport more people than ever before. So maybe he didn't succeed in getting his border wall, but he created a different type of wall that was even worse. Earlier this month, Biden also signed 3 executive orders to address policies that the Trump administration put in place. The creation of a task force, the executive orders include the creation of a task force focused on reuniting hundreds of families that were separated at the border. The child separation crisis is still ongoing. It's still something that is a stain on our country and the values of just all of us as just human beings, right? So we have to go out of our way to reunite those individuals. Also, executive order developing a strategy to address root causes of migration and expand opportunities for legal migration while restoring the U.S. asylum system by rescinding numerous Trump policies. A lot of people forget that he said that there was no metering at the border. I slept at the border. I was there watching how they were empty inside, but they were telling us it was full. So they were doing different things that there was just not legal and against their own stated policies. And then a review of the policies and barriers that were put in place by the Trump administration, which restricts access for asylum seekers and prevent our legal immigration system from operating fairly. While I believe these measures are a good start, we know that there's much room for improvement. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus has shared that there is a potential to organize around 3 different things: COVID relief for immigrant families, I-10 workers, access to equitable health care, and legalization of essential workers, TPS and DACA. It is a big discussion, but I appreciate that the city of LA has set up this committee, and that Mr. Chairman, that you are the head of it, and all the people that are participating. With that, I'll love to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Congressman Gomez, for your presentation, for your thoughts, for your analysis with regards to the proposal that's before us, and also for reminding us, once again, as we move proactively to legalize the sizable undocumented population we have, both in our city, our state, and our nation, to a reminder of the grotesque human rights, civil violations of immigrant families ripping, babies, from the arms of young mothers and fathers, and consequently caging them, on our border. And I know that we've gone down to the border on several occasions to witness ourselves and demand the release of these young babies, these young boys and girls being caged using taxpayer dollars, federal government dollars to violate their human civil rights. So once again, I thank you for not just what you're doing, what you're going to do, but your past actions as well. Let me ask a question or two. Then I want to open it up to our committee members. More importantly, given the legislative and political landscape right now at the federal level, and obviously the critical need to secure immigration reform, what challenges do you believe that we need to overcome, process-wise and politically in Washington, D.C.? We know that we have a majority when I mean the majority of Democrats on the House side. Obviously, we're at a 50-50 split in the U.S. Senate side. Oftentimes, it's said that perhaps our vice president, our California-owned Kamala Harris, will be that tiebreaker. I kind of tend to believe that before you get to a tiebreaker, you got to get to Joe Manchin. And Joe Manchin actually holds, all the cards in his hands right now with regards to what happens and how that relates to either the filibuster, the rule of 60, and whether we can have a proposal that will get to 60 or simply won't get to 60, but perhaps a different type of process, which would be, in this case, a reconciliation process. And will our leaders, both in the Congress and the Senate, move forward with allowing it to be part of reconciliation with any types of COVID budget action? So with that, I'll just throw that at you, and then from there, we're going to open it up to committee members.
Mr. Chairman, you have to know the realities in Washington to develop a strategy. I have one motto, which is get something done on immigration, right? Some people want comprehensive only. and that's what they want to go for. But there are drawbacks with going through just comprehensive only. The fact that you are going to be leveraged on other factors besides just granting citizenship, right? So if you try to do that, some folks get more leverage. So it's gonna be difficult, but I'm in favor of whatever we can get done. So if it's comprehensive through the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021, reintroducing and passing the proposals that we passed, the American Promise, the American Dream and Promise Act, which we've already passed on a bipartisan basis out of the House. Is it also an ag worker program that we've already passed out of the House? So there's different routes. So I'm pushing to pass those packages that we've already done before the end of March. And the reason why is that you don't have to go through regular order on bills that haven't been changed from the previous Congress if you do it before a certain period of time. So we want to move those forward. Some of us want to move those forward right away. Also proceed on the discussion and the debate and advocacy on the 60 on the broader immigration reform package. And here's the thing: regular order is tough. It's going to be tough regarding those individual standalone bills, and here's why.
And we're talking about committee markups in terms of regular order.
Yeah, correct. When you have a regular order, you introduce a bill, it gets referred to a committee, it goes through the hearing process, then a markup process, and you pass it out of the House. Eventually, it has to go to the Senate, and you need 60 votes in the Senate. So that threshold gives 10 Republicans a lot of leverage over the final package. So you can, if you do it through regular order, it's going to be very, very tough, in my opinion. So you want to go through the budget reconciliation process, which starts in the Senate. The Senate, which is Bernie Sanders is the chair of the budget committee, will determine if that's what they want to do. Here's the thing. When you do that, it drops the threshold to 50 plus 1. But then Mr. Price and Mr. DeLeon and even people on the city council will know, when it comes down to you only have a bare majority, those last 2 votes, the 2 or 3 votes that you need in order to pass something, the Manshines, the Kristen Cinemas get a lot of leverage, right? A lot of leverage, and they're going to do what they need to do for their own states. That's the rub, right? They will get even more powerful, even if you go through budget reconciliation. But that's probably still the best bet. However, even these other individual packages that we passed, right? The Dream and Promise Act, as well as the farm worker, we passed them in a time where they weren't going to be passed in the Senate. As one of the things that that was a dry rehearsal, right? As you know, when something is a real vote that has real consequences, it gets even, all of a sudden, those votes that you had become squishy, right? So we're going to have to run through all the scenarios with all the different members that we can figure out how do we get the votes necessary to pass any part of this. So, and an additional dilemma is that there are rules when it comes to dealing with budget reconciliation. And it's like there's different tests. And it has to impact the budget. It has to impact spending. It can only go through a certain 10 years. It has to deal with this something called the Bird Rule. But in essence, it has to have, you have to think of your policy through a budgetary lens, right? I asked the parliamentarian, how about, okay, more people get documented, they pay taxes, that's going to help our revenue. Is that enough? And they're like, no, you can't think of it that way. So it's more complicated than people think. But I think we have to run multiple routes simultaneously to see where we have where it gives, right? Where we can actually get something done. But my goal is we can't walk away empty-handed. We got to get something done, either through budget reconciliation, a must-pass appropriations bill, something. We got to get it done, and that's going to be the hard part. But you know what? That's why we're in office, right? To do the hard things, to actually deliver for people. And so like, not everybody's gonna be happy about what happens in the end. Mr. De Leon was there when we did the driver's license for immigrants, right? People wanted a certain thing and wanted the perfect. And Mr. De Leon, as well as other members, said, you know what? The perfect is going to keep our people driving without licenses, getting pulled over, getting their cars impounded. And they say, you know what? We can't afford that anymore. And they cut a deal and they passed the driver's license bill that has helped so many Californians. Right? So there's going to be tough decisions to make. But I'm going to be proud to make them in order to just change the lives of millions of people. And if that's the end of my career or multiple careers of my fellow members of Congress, so be it. Because that's what we have to do, right? We have to deliver.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman Gomez, and I like that fighting spirit that something has to get done. Period. And I know that was a very prominent quote in the Politico newspaper just recently. We're going to go to open up to questions from the committee members. Committee members, if you have any questions, please let me know. Signal to me. We're going to go to our vice chair. That is Mr. Curran Price. Mr. Curran Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
Mr. O'Farrell. We'll start with Mr. Price. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman, thank you for your leadership and for your insight on just how this process is going to work out. As mentioned earlier, we were all very excited when the president came out with a number of executive orders, some reversing, some charting new courses in the immigration field. But you know, the executive orders are not enough, obviously. From your perspective, which of these orders do you think we are most likely to be able to move forward, or combination of ones that we can actually move forward on beyond the president's proclamation into some policy and action?
Yeah. No, great question. Yeah, executive orders are not enough, but it's still a big deal. I will like the fact that we're no longer trying to dismantle DACA. That's a big deal, right? These kids are going to have a path forward. I actually had a staffer who was a DACA recipient who became a legal permanent resident, so he actually could work. And that's how he ended up working in my office, and then became a U.S. citizen in a short period of time. So just doing that, big deal. Additionally, sorry, I almost said, almost cursed, but there was stuff that this administration was doing that was just terrible. The past administration, sorry. Good example. You know, when they would get kids at the border that were, say, unaccompanied, they would put them into a facility. And then, when they would transition, wait for the court cases, what they were doing is that those nonprofits that were housing these kids were supposed to find a sponsor, which is the Office of Refugee Resettlement. What they were doing is they would go, once they would start to get a sponsor, oftentimes it's a family member, or like that they don't have a number or a cell phone or an email for. They usually used to go and get them, reunite them with that sponsor, and then they would go and stay with them until they went through the process. This administration, all of a sudden you saw an uptick for sponsors being arrested, right, for being undocumented. So I found that appalling. It's kind of like shooting at the medical teams in the field of battle. It's like, wait a second, you're going to go after, right? You're going to go after sponsors that are already here because you know that they're more likely to be undocumented, even though we're trying to place those kids. So like that kind of stuff is going to end. And these were not even real policies. These were, the administration almost gave ICE and different departments just free reign, right? They were actually going against some official policy. So having that in place, reuniting the kids and doing that is going to be a big deal. And then trying to undo some of it. And here's the difference, though. It's not going to be right away. It has to be done very intelligently. Some people are asking, why isn't he moving quicker on certain things? Because the Administrative Procedures Act that often hung up Trump, right? People would sue that he wasn't following the Administrative Procedures Act, could be used against the Biden administration just as easily by right-wing anti-immigrant groups. So I think the DACA part is huge. I think that when it comes to what's going on at the border and the metering of people seeking refugee status is or seeking asylum is a big deal, and then just a bunch of other little things. But it's significant. Even the groups that I've talked to when I had an immigration roundtable discussion with like Chirla and Cadesan and national groups, they're just like, we need to go for the big stuff, but we're thankful for just even the little things. The courts, they created that second wall by making it difficult for even people to become citizens, right? My sister, who was born in Mexico, was legal permanent resident. Donald Trump gets elected. My nephew is petrified that if my sister goes to visit my grandfather in Mexico, she won't be able to get back in. So she decides to actually become a citizen. It took her over almost 24 months to do that, right? That's the second wall that we're talking about. So speeding all that stuff up, helping people become citizens quicker is going to make a huge difference. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Beck, for yielding back your time. That's a saying that a lot of folks call a commentary. I yield my time. Let's go to Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for not adding that colorful, sometimes remark that comes after I yield my time in public comment. Congressman Gomez, Jimmy, my friend, thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm happy to be your constituent. Just really, really grateful to see you here. And I look forward to the post-pandemic and our visits in DC again. Thank you for your leadership on all of this. Thanks for being the heart and soul and the conscience, for standing up for all that is good and righteous and deeply American over the past 4 years against the malevolence of the Donald Trump administration and who he is as a human being and all of his just horrific policies. We have to remind ourselves that the Biden-Harris administration is now all of 4.5 weeks old. Just 4.5 weeks. So some amazing things have taken place. I'm so optimistic about this comprehensive immigration bill. And thank you for spelling out that even that won't be easy. But the good news is there is control of Congress and the Senate for policies that the majority of Americans support and believe in and want. So we'll see how that evolves. My question relates to the following. Mr. Price and I, a couple of years ago, spent time in Tijuana visiting the humanitarian crises that was amidst of some of the refugee camps of folks just suffering at the border because of Trump's policies. On the Tijuana side, we took food, bulk materials for women, children, families. It'll take us a while to get over the trauma and horror of the child separation policy back in 2017, 2018. And although that came to an end, we know that we're still dealing with hundreds of children that are still not reunited with their parents. And I just, it boggles the mind and spirit to think that actual babies were separated from their mothers, from their nursing mothers. And some of those babies are now 3 years still not reunited. So my question is, even though that child separation policy came to an end, we support a federal bill that would prohibit separating children from their families at any border, anywhere in the United States. And might there be some sort of federal law that would prohibit that into the future, just in case we have another Machiavellian president? what are the discussions in putting safeguards in place so that if we have another president such as Trump who manages to get into office, and that is entirely possible in the future, although we'll do everything we can to see that it never happens again, we need safeguards. So what are some of the ways you're looking at to create those safeguards at the federal level?
No, great question. And yeah, the entirety of what Trump did was just disgusting. And it was in a deliberate attempt to try to create a disincentive for people to come. And he didn't care about the consequences, right? We had a hearing just recently on the Oversight Committee regarding the impact of the child separation policy on the kids. And they knew what it would do to those kids, but they didn't care, right? They just didn't care. And then even when I spent the night at the border, I actually spent the night with the family, Maria Mesa, who tried to cross and got tear gassed, slept on the concrete with them. And they finally got through. And I invited the daughter to be my guest at the State of the Union. I invited Maria, but she was scared. The daughter is actually speaking English already, real quick, fast. But she was traumatized, extremely traumatized. So we need to deal with that. But no, we're looking at different ways to prohibit that. But you also have to understand how they did it. One of the things that they did is that anybody that crosses between 2 points of entry, a point between the ports of entry, that they will, instead of being gone through a administrative procedure, right? That's the way that traditionally did. They started going after them as a criminal violation. That's what allowed them to separate the kids from the parents. There is a bill that we've been looking at with Joaquin Castro to say that you can't do that. It's not criminal to go in between the 2 ports of entry. Additionally, what they were doing is that they're metering, right? They're like slowing down the spigot or like the number of people that could apply for asylum, and then forcing them to stay in Mexico, where it was extremely violent. When I was there, three kids were young adult men who were trying to come in. They were stuck because of the Remain in Mexico policy. They went to a neighborhood that was extremely violent. They chopped up 2 of them and sent the other one back to the immigrant site to be a warning to everybody else. What you have was desperation to cause them to go into the in between the ports of entry. So we're looking at trying to undo that as a criminal offense, and that's because that's what was used, right? That was what was used as the zero tolerance policy. Instead of just saying, okay, it's a violation, administrative review, we're gonna send it along. No, they did it as a criminal offense. That's what caused it. So that's a bill by Joaquin Castro. I'm in support of it. It's going to be tough to pass, but I think we have to look at that across the board so that doesn't happen again. But yeah, it's extremely problematic. There are probably other bills. This bill, the Citizenship Act of 2021, probably has something in there. I got to check it out what it says, but yeah, they were doing it on purpose, and that's so decriminalizing it is a first step.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Farrell. Any other questions from the members? Seeing no questions or commentaries from the members, Mr. Gomez, I want to thank you very much once again for taking time out of your busy schedule. We always enjoy when you come back home to Los Angeles. You please let us know, as well as your staff, how we can be instrumental in making sure we can get, comprehensive immigration reform. If it's not comprehensive, if it's not a silver bullet, if it's silver BBs, at the end of the day that are cumulative, that get the effect, the outcome that we desire, that'd be fantastic. That goes beyond obviously TPS, DACA, as well as our ag workers and the sizable undocumented population that drives this economy, that makes Los Angeles, a spectacularly diverse city. So from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of all the committee members, I want to thank you once again for sharing your thoughts, your insights. Please stay in touch with us and surely let us know what we can do to make sure that your efforts in Washington, D.C. are successful.
Thank you much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and everyone, and all the council members on this committee. Your work is crucial. It gives people faith that they are secure in the city of Angels and the county of Los Angeles. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you much. Wish you a good day. Thank you so much. So, colleagues, we want to thank the Congressman for his wonderful presentation. We're going to go and leave this item now, file item number 1. We're going to go to public comments, but before we go to public comments, we're going to go very quickly to file item number 2, which is just a quick report back from a motion that was made, I believe, before Ms. Rahman's and my time, a motion made, I think, about a year ago, with regards to a report back on 2 very important items. I want to welcome our representative from the City Attorney's Office to present on the matter. And please come forward as we discuss the issue of Flores, as well as the Flores issue, as well as the public charge benefit issue as it impacts immigrants and the potential of what may happen to them in the future with regards to legalization.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Mike Dundas from the City Attorney's Office. I apologize for being on the phone today. I'm having
no problem
difficulties
at all.
with my computer.
We look forward to the next meeting when we can see your handsome mug.
I will be back. Yes.
Welcome, Mr. Dundas.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, as the chair mentioned, these 2 reports are a few years old, and so I thought it'd be more interesting for the committee to just do a quick overview of the efforts of the City of Los Angeles through the City Attorney's Office with the support of the City Council took with immigration litigation more generally. And if there's specific questions on Flores or public charge, I'm happy to answer them. Over the 4 years of the Trump presidency, the city filed 8 lawsuits against the Trump administration. 5 of those were focused on immigration. The immigration lawsuits were primarily focused on 2 main categories: unlawful federal grant conditions where the Trump administration sought to force the city to participate in civil immigration enforcement, and the other was 3 lawsuits on the census, given the city's interest in accurate and fair census count. The 3 lawsuits on the census were on the addition of the citizenship question, the presidential memo to exclude undocumented immigrants from the apportionment data, which is actually still an issue today, and then the Commerce Department's efforts, to shorten the time needed to conduct a complete and thorough census account, which is actually still a case that the city is litigating in district court right now, even after the change to the Biden administration, just to make sure that the count is accurate when the data is delivered to the city for redistricting purposes. And the city has also participated in 104 amicus briefs in federal court. 74 of those amicus briefs were focused on immigration. Those efforts ran the gamut and started almost immediately into the Trump administration in February of 2017 with a brief challenging the Muslim ban in the Eastern District of New York, and culminated most recently in a brief that was filed in January, right before the end of the administration, on the public charge that was authored by our office. Of the 74 immigration briefs that were filed, our office was the lead author of 32 of them, and we were the lead city to organize coalitions of local governments on the subjects that focused on specifically DACA, family separation, the Flores litigation, the public charge rule, TPS policy, and a number of refugee actions. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer if there's any specific questions on Flores or the public charge. The Congressman actually went into some great detail on both of those, and so that would be my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. I want to ask a quick question. The agreement on the Flores agreement has not become law. Does the agreement need any revisions to reflect the realities of what is happening today?
Well, you mean, should the parties, meaning the Flores plaintiffs and the federal government, renegotiate the settlement agreement? Is that the question, sir?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's possible that there the agreement has stood the test of time for almost 30 years now. It survived a number of challenges by the Trump administration. The Trump administration also tried to administratively pass a rule to get themselves out from underneath the requirements of the settlement agreement, which we supported in litigation challenging that DHS rule. I think that it protects the purpose for which it was intended. There is some dispute among the different groups of advocates who are supporting the efforts of the minors that are protected by the agreement as to what may be the best path forward in terms of, for example, right now there's, in Judge G's court, there's an order requiring the release of migrant children because of the COVID conditions. And there's a lot of discussion right now in court about the notice requirements that parents need to be given. And so it's hard to say with specific detail to give you exact suggestions because even the attorneys among the plaintiffs don't necessarily agree sometimes what's the best path forward, but they all agree that the settlement agreement itself is the baseline which will provide the necessary protections going forward. And so it might not make sense to open up that to renegotiation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. Any questions from the committee members? Any questions from the committee members? I'm seeing none. Mr. Dennis, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to give us a report back on the motion that was made a few years ago by now Council President Nuri Martinez. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we're going to proceed to public comment. Mr. Dennis, if you could be so kind enough to provide us today with the guidance to the public as they prepare to call in.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the members of the public calling in, when it's your turn to speak, please state your name and which of the agenda items you would like to speak on. You will have 1 minute to speak on one agenda item or 2 minutes if you would like to speak on both of the items. In addition, you may ask for 1 minute of general public comment. We will inform you when your time is up. When you're speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic as listed on the agenda. The goal is to get through as many speakers as possible. If you're not speaking on topic, or if we cannot tell whether you are speaking on an agenda item, you will get a brief warning from myself or the chair. And if you stray off topic, you may forfeit the rest of your time, and we will move on to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. We're going to go to Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, if you could be so kind enough to read the instructions for the public comment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-217-2990 and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Please note, if you are listening to the meeting on a computer or speakerphone, you will need to turn down the volume on those devices before you speak. If you do not turn down the volume, there will be an echo. Again, once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment will have 1 minute per item and 1 additional minute for general public comment. This concludes the instructions, Mr. Chair.
Gracias, señora clerk. Muchas gracias. Now, so we're ready to take on public comment right now. Stephen, if you're ready, can we please have our first speaker?
Yes. Okay. Caller with the last, or who dialed in from a private number, can you please press star 6 to unmute yourself? Hello?
This is this bus.
Yes. Can you please state your name and the items you wish to speak on?
Both items in general public comment, please.
Please go ahead.
Okay, on the first item, I'd like to thank you for inviting Jimmy Gomez to speak today before the council. I think it's very important for us as members of the public to have different forums, like even including city council meetings, to get educated on what's going on in DC. However, I was disappointed that this committee didn't utilize public comment before the agenda items, as is usually done. I don't know why that protocol was violated today, but Jimmy Gomez advertises himself as a working class hero, and as a working class Angelino, it would have been nice to, be able to have the Congressman hear us talk about certain things, like maybe his support for the Restaurants Act, having provisions that actually help workers instead of being a giveaway to bosses, and just members like me who would have told them to abolish ICE and a bunch of other things that would have, immigrant communities that would have loved to have an opportunity to have the congressman's ear for just a minute. So I would like Mr. De Leon to go back to a system of letting the public speak before agenda items are called. With regard to the second item, I'm very confused at how a report back on something that was filed in October 2019 is on the agenda in February 2021. As a member of the public, I can only conclude that when you ask for report backs, that it's mainly PR. Hopefully that you guys are buying time for the public to forget, for the public to not have so much attention on the issues, because every day is a shit show in the city and we have to constantly fight back against other issues that pop up. But I don't see how useful it is for the city to request report backs but not move on reports for well over a year. This president's now out of office, and I know that there are certain elements such as public charge that are still relevant, but overall I just think that this kind of speaks to how broken the process is in city council in terms of actually following through and caring about things that you will put to report backs or even like weaker standards, especially when it comes to dealing with the police. So moving on to general public comment, the most troubling thing I heard today was Kevin De Leon suggest that the way to deal with hate crimes in the city is to work more closely with the LAPD. The LAPD still has not accounted for a racist Valentine that they sent out, totally dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, not to mention the chief's consistent disrespect for the memory of George Floyd ever since he died in May, and blamed protesters for his death. It's beyond out of touch and quite frankly insulting for Kevin De Leon to think that the only way for us to deal with hate crimes in the city is with more police, with dealing with LAPD.
Thank you very much to our caller. Can we have the next caller, please?
Mr. Chair, 1 second before the next caller. If I might extend to City Attorney, if I made just 1 point, for those who are giving public comment, the chair has noted at the beginning of the meeting left the 2 agenda items open. They have not been acted on by the committee, and that's so public comment is taken before any action being taken by this committee on those 2 items. Just for the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. The next caller.
I believe the queue is cleared.
That's it. No one else.
Yes, no one else.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. I want to thank you much to the public caller that came in today. That concludes our public comment for today. Madam Clerk, I'd like to move to note and file the city attorney report, file item number 2 without objection. That will be the order. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
We have second by Ms. Nithya Raman. Colleagues, this was 2 presentations today. That concludes our meeting today. So, Madam Clerk, can you please confirm that the desk is indeed clear?
The desk is clear, sir. Thank you.
Muchas gracias to my colleagues, Mr. Vice Chair, to my colleagues, Ms. Raman and Mr. O'Farrell. Please have a very good day. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.